Tom Bull, welcome, man.
Thanks, Shori. Great to be here.
Let's start with you, mate. Who is Tom Bull? The man, the farmer, the family guy?
Simple story. I grew up at Holbrook in New South Wales. Always loved sheep. Started my stud at 10-year-old and, started with 3 ewes and basically did that, came to school in Sydney.
Where'd you go to school?
College of Knowledge, Scots College.
Another one.
Yeah. So did that, went jackarooing, which first year out of uni. Degree in Orange Ag, which actually back then was a part of Sydney Uni, which sounds very flash.
Ag Ecos?
No, farm management farm business,
okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
And actually I left university and I loved the sheep industry and I wanted to get experience at every level. So the first job I did when I left uni was actually worked in a boning room. Worked for an American company who had this firm belief that, they wanted you to understand every part of the carcass.
Yeah.
So I started off in hardened abattoirs, getting up at 5 a.m, cutting up sheep straight out of university.
Had you ever done that when you were a kid? Or ever seen it when you were a kid?
Yeah, we were home kill. So we used to,
okay.
Dad used to kill 2 sheep every Friday.
So your old man was a farmer?
Yeah. Off a farm. He actually was in state politics for a few years. He was in Legislative Council.
Okay.
When I came home. Actually, I went work for Meat and Livestock Australia in the processing sector.
Okay.
After my stint in the abattoir, and then basically 2000, I really had to make the decision: do I want to come home? Came home. Dad had basically sold down. We were down to 90 acres, and ever since basically kept building it up. So when I came home, I actually started a retail business in wool as well. We processed all our dooners and we sold our dooners in mire around the country and obviously, running the sheep meat as well.
Yeah, wow. The boning room when you were – because how old would you have been, like 23, 24?
Yep.
Did you find it confronting or it was just natural to you?
At the time it was hard. You basically come out of university and you're standing with – for 8-9 hours a day, in minus whatever, with a lot of people, at the time you probably didn't have a lot in common with.
Yeah.
But it was great. It was a great grounding experience and you get to learn a lot about people.
Yeah.
Get to learn a lot about hard work and you also get to know, a lot about the lamb industry and the carcasses and where the cuts go. And, it was fantastic. And I always say it was probably one of the best things I ever did.
Yeah. How long did you do it for?
Nearly 12 months.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you imagine doing it for your entire career, though, those people that are in that environment forever?
It's tough. I mean, I listened to the stories with Vic, on your earlier podcast, getting up at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough enough starting at 5. And, it is a big issue for the Australian meat industry is labour.
Yeah.
Getting people who want to cut up meat in cold temperatures week in, week out. And, it is going to be continually an industry issue.
Yeah. What about your family? Like, where did that all come apart? Like, did you meet when you were living in that environment, or was it a university romance that you met your wife?
University romance. So it's actually sort of semi-school, but let's call it university.
Scots guys, just start early. Just latch onto the first good one you find.
We were quite the opposite. So university, and apart from my wife, went to London for a few years, which we split up. When she came back, we got back together.
Yeah. Is she a country girl?
No, she's actually Hunter Valley, but she was working, before she came home to the farm, she was working at Women's Weekly.
Okay.
So
in PR?
In advertising predominantly.
Wow.
So if we had been smart, I probably would have moved to the city and get a job gardening or something as opposed to vice versa. And, I look back and her father back then when I was working at an abattoir, I mean, I'm sure, and he used to just question his daughter with a choice. He couldn't believe what I was doing, going, you've got a degree and why do you want to go cut up meat?
Yeah.
But it was a good decision.
Yeah. A good decision lifestyle-wise, a good decision financially?
Certainly, it's just about experience. So many people in the lamb industry knew one component. Meat, finishing, production.
Yeah.
My whole philosophy the whole time has been what the lamb industry is lacks people who understands every part of the industry, right through the market, right through to production. And now, I'm quite comfortable to talk at retailing, as comfortable as I am talking about production.
Mm-hmm.
And that just allows you to get that scope when you make decisions on breeding. How does that impact a consumer?
Yeah,
who are you targeting? It was a stepping stone, and and I do think financially there probably would have been better jobs. I had enough to get a few schooners to the pub after work, and that's about it.
Yeah,
but as I said, it was a really great experience.
Yeah, what's your wife's name?
Phoebe.
Interesting. We went up to Armidale last year to see the Ranges Valley production, and as part of that, we went to Tom Bowman's farm. And
no, Tom.
Yeah, great guy, and I forget his wife's name, but she was a gorgeous woman. Emily,
Yep.
And the challenges she had, like she was a Northern Beaches girl, but the challenges she had, did Phoebe?
Yes.
Phoebe have any challenges with adapting to like real country life? Like, no disrespect to the Hunter Valley, but it's blue blood country up there in terms of farming. Like it's not hardcore farming, I would say.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think it's probably a loss of identity. So many corporate professionals marry farmers, and they go to an environment, where all of a sudden they couldn't practice what they were doing. And you look at our area, there's so many very smart, people, women who've married farmers in the district. But the online era has changing that. Phoebe's just finished a job with the Block for the last couple of years.
Amazing.
She was doing advertising for the Block TV show. So I think we're evolving. I've also got a sister who's actually selling biscuits with Buy for the Bush at Qantas today in markets.
Yeah.
The whole online is changing. There's more opportunities than there was, say, we got married in 2005.
Yeah.
It's changing. But it is an issue. If you want to get vibrant communities, it's how you actually tap those resources.
Yeah.
Because there's some really smart people, men and women, who are underutilised, and a lot of that's because they get dragged out to a country area and put in an unfamiliar surrounds, and you've got to make a go of it.
Yeah. Is there anything that they've done formally to bring those women together so that they do have that community outside of the obvious stuff that you two are probably or naturally very social people, but do the women in particular do anything to ensure that they look after each other, that there is opportunities and that they explore opportunities?
I think the issue as you get in those real, we're very urban. I mean, Holbrook, we're 5 hours from Sydney, but we've got Wagga and Albury on our doorstep. 40 minutes. We're actually 6 k's from town.
Yeah.
So it's where you sort of go, the areas of Burke, where it's 100 kilometres. I mean, we go to the gym. My wife goes to the gym. She was at Pilates this morning.
Yeah.
You can still do a lot of that real day-to-day stuff that you would have done in the city.
Got it.
It's when you get to that 140 kilometre hour drive to go to Pilates. That's
so
one way.
Isolated.
That's where you really miss that face-to-face connection.
Yeah.
But there's ways and means. All of a sudden I saw some of those online fitness, two-way sort of cameras and, and I think it's just using technology to try and bridge that gap.
Yeah. Not the same though. Like I literally just finished reading this book called The Joy of Movement by that famous health psychologist Kelly McGonigal that I think she's got the most watched most watched TED Talk of all time, where she talked about stress as your friend. And she talks about the science behind the importance of people doing physical things together, exercise together, and why it's so important. So I think regardless of technology bringing the information to people, the fact that they're still isolated from other human beings will forever be a challenge for those people that are truly a long way away.
It's tough. And as I said, we're very fortunate. And we've got a great community. We've got a community gym.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so I do feel for the real distances, the territory, the sort of 500k drive type stuff.
Yeah, too hard. You have siblings?
3 sisters.
Are they all on the farm? Or?
No. They're all out doing their thing. The upside is when I came home, really I took it on myself and have built up the farm as opposed to inheriting a farm. I've built it up myself.
Got it.
So they're not involved. They've got their own. They come home, given mum and dad still live on the farm. They come home a fair bit. But yeah, they're not involved in the farm.
Is your dad still working with you?
Yeah, he does. He's sort of taken a step back, and he does a little bit of off-farm work. But yeah, he's still very fit, can outwork me still.
Yeah, incredible.
And yeah, he's still involved. He's more, he does some of the financial stuff. And
how old is he?
He's 74.
Yeah, and he's still fit, like
Still
truly
fit. Fit. Yeah.
Has he? Did he make? Because like you get both sides of the ledger. I find with the farmers that they're all strong as oxes, but the ones that do look after themselves and are conscious of it seem to be like what you describe your dad as, whereas the others just end up having heart attacks quite young. Has your dad done anything deliberately, or has he just got good genes?
Oh no, he just. I think he's done something, and I've tried to do the same the last 2 years, just cut his portions down. He works hard. He doesn't have an off button Sunday, apart from watching the AFL, he'll get out and do stuff on the farm.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things with farmers and health, and I've heard you talk about mental health, a lot of it is how stress manifests. I remember that 06 drought, I put on 10 kilos. It's how you actually feel pretty good in your head. You feel like you're actually, pretty good in yourself, but it's how stress manifests. And I think, that's where there's probably that unhealthy relationship, the way stress manifests in a lot of young and old farmers.
With the food and the booze, or?
Yeah, not only that, but it's just a way of relieving stress, binge eating and stuff like that. And you look at, the reality is a lot of our farming is now mechanised.
Yep.
The days of us doing stuff, things are getting easier and easier. My father's generation would laugh at, going to the gym.
Yeah.
What, don't you work hard enough?
Yeah. Well, Vic says that here, we introduce posture strong programs and things to look after the guys' backs. And Vic just scoffs at it. He came through in that generation where it was just, if you work hard, then you'll be fine.
Yep.
But I think our generation, 1, know more, 2, demand more, and 3, with no disrespect, I think there's a higher degree of wisdom around, if I want to do this as a career, then I do need to do things slightly differently.
Yep. And it's attracting staff as well.
Yeah.
A bit like we talked about the boning room. People getting a 22-year-old to put in a race and drench sheep or do whatever you do on a 45-degree day, they're going to want another career.
Yeah,
they can't touch phones. And that's, we've had to try and evolve our technology to make life easier. And subsequently, we've got no problem getting labour.
Yeah.
We've got good technology.
Interesting. Do you think about with the technology, the environmental impact of that? Is it any consideration, or it's all about productivity?
In terms of
if you've got machinery, then you need petrol, and that perverse equation of, that everyone talks about farming having the biggest carbon footprint, which we'll dive into a little bit, but quite often it's more the technology of what's on the farm, how you get things into the farm, how you get things out of the farm that is the true contributor to that.
Yeah, we're probably machinery we don't have heaps of, and a lot of our machinery is to do with providing feed for animals. So we don't do a lot of cropping.
Yeah.
So I don't look at, our machinery and basically the carbon footprint, and that's because we don't have a lot. We have a few motorbikes and a couple of utes and a tractor and a feed wagon.
Well, they're compulsory, man.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt, as farmers, we have changed our outlook I've changed my outlook in 10 years on the environment and how we farm. And to me, that's ongoing.
Yeah. What have been the biggest changes?
Well, I think it's interesting if you look at where we grew up. Our Holbrook Land Care is one of the first and one of the most successful land care organisations in the country. It has changed our district. They've planted nearly 8% of the district to trees in the last 20 years. And a lot of those issues, so when I grew up, we had a lot of salinity. We also had a lot of erosion. And you started to see one of the real interesting things, a lot of the trees started dying. So the trees we still had, a lot of them started dying.
Because of the salts?
No, what it was is because of there's lurchers and Christmas beetles would attack the trees. And because so many of the trees have been cleared out 100 years ago, there was no birds. So the natural predator to these insects were birds.
Yeah, got it.
So really a lot of and we've got some really good land care people that basically worked out what species to bring back the birds. So all of a sudden we've seen a lot of positive change. We've got a lot more species of animals now than what we did when we were a kid.
Yeah.
And we talk about, regenerative agriculture. We look at a regenerative area. Holbrook as a district is a regenerative area.
Who created the master plan for that? Because it sounds ingenious.
Well, that was Bob Hawkes back in his day. He created land care, but it's how you attract funding. These organisers, we've got really good people. And I'm one of those people, I'm not necessarily great at anything, but I use key people to make my decisions.
When you say we've got good people, you mean in Holbrook?
So agronomists, accountants. And for us, we're very fortunate. We've got land care. I'm not one of those people. I can't rattle off the 25 species of birds.
Got it.
But I'll ring Kylie, our local land care rep, when we're putting in trees, she goes, this is one you need to target. Plant the trees. And sure enough, you look at, we've got one of the largest species of the superb parrot in the state, on our farm. There's fish that hadn't been seen for decades, all of a sudden starting to pop up again. So, land care is a really good thing, and you need to get it as a district. And even to the point now where they're actually getting the local schools involved. So, it becomes part of the education. My kids come home and say, Dad, have we got any of these spotted whatever birds, So they're taking interest, and that tends to sort of propel it.
Yeah, powerful.
So I think, from an environmental point of view, the next challenge for us is attacking that carbon neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more, Tom, on, because I think it's a super important conversation around this environment where everything is working together, that you reintroduce species and then it stops the trees dying. Because I think one of the things that I get most frustrated with the whole plant-based movement and the vegetarian movement is that that's the solution to everything. Whereas if it's still just monocropped farming, then it's probably adding more fuel to an already big fire than otherwise. Do you think that this practice of having plants, animals, crops, trees, perennials all living together is the only way to actually have an agricultural practice that is ultimately going to serve the planet and its people?
I think it's getting balance. I think animals, and you could say I've got a vested interest, but the whole cropping and horticultural movement is based on creating a sterile environment so those animals can utilise moisture to grow tomatoes or wheat or whatever else. We don't need a sterile environment.
Explain that more.
So if you're putting a crop of wheat, oats, tomatoes, you don't want insects.
Yeah.
You don't want, any competing weeds. So you're basically wiping the canvas clean of everything. And remembering
all living creatures.
70% of our animal diversity is insects.
Yeah.
So, it is frustrating when you sort of see people attack livestock producers. I think we can do a lot more in sequestering carbon. And it's not talking, we're just doing it.
Yeah.
So
what are you doing on that? A couple of things for those, and there's not many anymore, but those that don't understand what carbon sequestration is, what is it and what are you doing to improve that?
So really it's using trees and grass to sequester carbon back into the ground.
And why does that happen?
In terms of the scientific reason?
From a farmer's scientific perspective, why are grass and trees so important to sequestration?
Well, as basically green foliage is the oxygen suck.
Yeah, so
the CO2 suck. It's what puts in the ground. So there's two parts of that. You need actually to graze the animals to then create that green mass to be able to draw that carbon back in the ground. And I'm not for no means an expert on this at all. The second thing is we can do it whilst maintaining natural biodiversities. And that worries me equally as much as increases in, climate temperature. Because, we saw so much of that, if ecosystems become unbalanced, the whole thing falls over. Bees currently. So, my attitude, we can sequester a hell of a lot more carbon than we produce with our animals. And the numbers, the key thing for us is getting the metrics right. There's so much rubbishy numbers out there. I saw a US EPA report that agriculture only contributes 9% of the US carbon and only 3% of that is animals.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a super important point because I don't know whether it was the same study that I read the other day that when they because this is the biggest comparison that all these activists use is the biggest contributor is the transport industry.
Yep.
And then it is the animal agricultural industry. But the way they measure the animal agricultural industry is from start to finish. So everything, all the equipment, all the people, all the animals, the whole shooting match. Whereas the transport industry, the only thing that they measure is the emissions from the exhaust. So they don't take into account how that truck was built, how it was transported, all the other residual things that go with that. So you're not actually comparing apples with apples. And, it's a frustrating number that people use. What is it, 14, 17%, depending on who you listen to, that is animal agriculture's contribution to carbon emissions, where it's factually incorrect.
Yeah, and that's always with social media, small bits of information are dangerous. And, there's snippets of information that you see from time to time, and when I say time to time, it's becoming daily.
Yeah.
But I do think, I honestly do think you look at a lot of the, changes in, numbers of vegetarians, it doesn't seem to be changing greatly. I think it's a bit like the last federal election. You hear so much hype about what the average person's thinking, and all of a sudden, you think Labor's going to romp it in because that's all you're hearing. Yeah. But I think average Joe, I don't think we can be complacent as livestock producers. We just got to get in the front foot. Yeah. To do that, we've got to understand the metrics, how much methane we put out, how much we suck in.
Yeah.
Unless we get those, and that's probably stage one. Industries set 2030 as an industry to become carbon neutral. You speak to our local land care, we're not far off now.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
And that's without even trying.
Yep. On the methane piece, is it predominantly the burping and to a lesser extent the farting of the animals? And is a healthy animal contributing less because they're just generally healthier than an unhealthy animal?
I think there's a couple of things you got to look at. The first thing is we look from a production point of view. How long is that animal on the planet for? So we see a lot of people grow animals really, really slowly on poor quality grass. That animal might take 3 years to hit a slaughter weight. That versus 12 months. So there's different components to that argument. It's not only the intensity of methane, it's how long they produce it for.
Yeah, got it.
And from a genetic standpoint, which is the core of our business, is lamb genetics. We look a lot at that and how system changes affect carbon output. Because it's not as cut and dried. There's some great research, and I think human innovation will overcome it. They're looking at seaweed.
Seaweed's a big one, yeah.
70% reduction. We're early days. So I think we will find ways and means of reducing it.
Yeah.
But also you got to look at the reality. If a lamb is only here for 10 weeks, versus 2 years, that per kilogram, how much carbon you use to produce a kilogram of lamb is remarkably different.
Yeah. And
so many of our systems, are now looking at that because we do believe at some point there'll be some sort of tax. And I think I flicked you that, EU are starting to talk about it. A change in government could see a tax.
A tax on meat.
On animals.
On animals.
So, we're probably, even though I don't think it's I'd rather the carrot and the stick. There's what are they proposing though? Because it seems to be imposing an impost on one part of the agricultural industry when they're not looking holistically at the plant-based agricultural side of it. Yeah, I've heard per head, but as you say, until they get the metrics right, it's all pie in the sky. And that's metrics for everything. Cropping, horticulture, human, basically heating. There's a whole range of stuff.
Yeah.
But as I said, we've just got our little patch of the world and our little responsibility, and
how little is your patch of the world, Tom, insofar as like how many head of lambs are you producing a year?
We produce this year we'll produce about 8,000 or 9,000 lambs.
Yeah.
They're all stud lambs. Those now our genetics. So we sell rams. That's our business. They'll produce 1 million lambs.
Mm.
So nearly 5% of the industry.
Damn.
Are by our genetics. And that's so what we do has, even though we're very small in terms of our farm, we do have a reasonable impact on industry.
Yeah, no, I understand it. What's the ultimate vision with Lampro?
It started off as a kid who just enjoyed breeding sheep, and really the key thing for us is how we design sheep, and we look at a number, animal welfare, cost of production, environment, and end consumer.
Yeah.
So our growth has simply been, and I always say the best thing that ever happened as I came into the most traditional industry on earth, the Australian sheep industry, where people put on tweed jackets and, go and put sheep on halters and drag them around.
Yeah.
And still most people do that. And I came in, and I think I actually spent a bit of time with a bloke from Ingham's Chickens, and he actually came down and stayed on the farm there for a few days. And he was actually, he's an old bloke. I don't think he's still around now, but he actually had a really big impact on me because
so far as production planning or automation,
the way they design sheep with the end market in mind.
The chickens,
he always used to say we breed chickens for 2 price points: $5.99, $6.99. And then we work back, and I think the biggest thing we did was look at the end product and then work back, as opposed to sit there. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with farmers. We produce something and expect someone to buy it.
Yeah.
So it becomes very complex. All of a sudden, we've got a consumer that's changing and changing rapidly. The flexitarian movement, portion size changes, the way they're eating. So we need to reflect that in our breeding. We also then got to be able to produce something people make money with.
Yeah.
Because if they don't make money, they can't farm. So it is complex. Adding animal welfare, a huge part of what we do is trying to basically reduce the need to do stuff. So
what do you mean by that?
Well, we used to have to drench our sheep.
Okay.
We've now bred sheep that don't need much drenching, if any at all.
What's changed?
So we just select sheep. And really it's a bit like, I always say it's a bit like man flu. My wife would probably say if we got the same level of infection, I'd go down like a sack of spuds and she'd be fine.
Really?
So the reality is the way we select sheep not to drench is just basically expose them to worms and let the same thing that for the last billion years has happened of evolution. Some sheep do really well. Other sheep don't.
Yeah.
So we take the sheep that don't handle worms out of the system and then we breed from the sheep that do. So much of our work, and a lot of these animal welfare, we don't mules. We've bred sheep that don't need mulesing. Our lamb survival rates have increased 10%, in the last 10 years. So, all those things impact welfare, and it's really just we take an evolutionary approach to our breeding and we just measure heaps of stuff. And over time, you do make big changes on so many levels. So much of what we do is, and there's so many components to that, because all of a sudden by removing drench, we're not putting any chemicals into the sheep at all, as well as a big cost.
Yeah, so everyone wins.
Everyone wins.
You win, animal wins, and consumer wins.
And so, so much of, and even little things like by improving their mothering ability, by improving the mothering ability of our ewes, and a lot of it's with foxes. Foxes are a big issue. So, we've got a lambing paddock. We'll have 2 foxes working in every lambing paddock every night trying to steal lambs. We just basically started selecting sheep that chase them away. So every lamb we tag at birth, and we watch. And if the mum gets a bit flighty, we take her out of the system.
Wow.
So we start to breed sheep that actually are really good mums, and it's all done in a very basic way. So it's a lot what we do. It's basic on the level, but it just takes a lot of data.
Yeah.
Collecting a lot of data.
And is there a lot of discipline around that data collection, or is it as
it's got to be squeaky clean.
Yeah.
And because we've got numbers, we can see that. And we talk – so one other thing we've done in our sheep, they have a lot of twins. So our twinning rates are nearly 80%.
Interesting.
Now,
is that unique to
Well, sheep merinos here, remembering 95% of the sheep in Australia have been merinos who typically don't have a high reproductive rate. So 80% of our ewes now have twins. So that has a big impact on profitability, but it also has a massive impact.
Positive impact? Or?
Positive impact. Because at the end of the day, you got one ewe.
2 for 1.
She's eating grass all year.
Yeah.
If she has 2 lambs, that's going to be significantly more profitable than one has, but it has a big environmental impact as well. Because that ewe, if she's emitting methane, her production, you can actually reduce your carbon by 30% for every kilogram of lamb by having a high twinning flock. It's pretty simple. You've got a ewe, she's burping all year round.
Yeah.
If she's producing 2 lambs, not 1, that has a massive impact.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how many of the things we're trying to do to make our producers viable in variable seasons, are actually helping the environment as well.
Yeah, incredible. How do you look? I want you to talk to me about, from an economic sustainability perspective, the regenerative farming, the Joel Salatin style farming and the intensive industrialized farming. And I mean both short term, because I think short term of the regen farming is probably more marginal, but the longer term in terms of its ability to continue as a viable going concern and what it's doing for the planet and all those things is probably positive, whereas the other end of the spectrum, high yields in the short term, but the destruction and particularly to the soils and things is damaging. Do you balance the two? And no doubt you're somewhere.
You got to try and, at the end of the day, there's good reason why only 2% of the farming population is regenerative. And that's just simple returns per hectare. So I look at it, and what they do, I 100% believe in. There's no doubt plant diversity, rotational grazing. There's a lot of that stuff that's really good stuff. You won't have any disagreement with me on a lot of those principles. However, it's trying to balance a productive business unit and also trying to restore the environment. The only thing I'd probably say is when people talk regenerative agriculture, there's probably the assumption that the rest is degenerative.
Yep.
Where I've just explained our community is regenerative.
Yep.
So I'm probably more, let's get measures of carbon. However you get there, that's your, rather than, I suppose, say I'm regenerative or not, let's get objective measures.
Yeah.
Let's tie.
But why? But it sounds to me like your practices are largely regenerative. Who's defining what is and what isn't?
Well, I think there's some depending. A lot of the models with a regenerative, it's maintaining ground cover. So we like to maintain ground cover as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the regen farms will actually sell stock. So when things get tough, they'll offload. We'll actually put them in a confined area. So.
And feed them.
Yeah. With silage. So silage, when we've got a lot of grass, we put grass underground and pull it out. So there's two things in that. The first thing is, and I say, and I point to Vic, ask a question to Vix, if your supply network was from Orange to the Queensland border for the last 12 months and they're all regenerative, where would your meat supply come from? You wouldn't have one.
Yeah.
Because they've all sold.
Yeah.
So do I think that model is sustainable for the meat industry? I don't think it is. So it's how we work out.
In the short term or ever?
Well, I just told you about all that genetic work we've done.
Yeah.
If our policy was to sell all our animals every time we lost ground cover, what would happen to all that genetic work?
Yeah,
it goes.
Yeah, of course.
So we look at, and even with climate change and the heat, You know, I woke up at 5 o'clock last Saturday morning to shift sheep. It was 36.5. How we handle sheep now in the heat is different. Again, we confine them. And we put them in small paddocks, not feedlots, small paddocks. And it's actually the sheep do so much better because there's two things. And I always have this debate, is the first thing is if animals have got to walk huge amounts of area to get their daily intake in that heat, it's not comfortable. You know, it's no different, you know, to me on a 45-degree day. If I've got to walk 2 kilometres to get my salad, you know, it's going to take a lot out of me.
Got you.
So we look at practical ways of saying, well, if you bring the sheep in nice and close and provide everything they need, they're pretty comfortable. It's when all of a sudden you've got them in a huge landscape. And I think probably one of the biggest things I don't like about the perception is the use of confined area feeding. It's so good for the environment because all of a sudden, you know, farmers aren't, you know, basically making their country bare. And I had a great debate with a mate in Sydney the other day, and, you know, he was going, oh, you know, I don't like feedlots, I only like grass, and they've got to wander around the paddocks. And I said, where do you live, mate? And he goes, oh, Wallara. And I said,
funny,
what do you live in? And he goes, oh, just a 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
I said, how many kids you got? And he said, 2. I said, they're obviously very confined. They're obviously very unhappy. Oh, no, they love life.
Yeah.
And you have the debate and you go, what's the difference between putting a kid in a 2-bedroom studio than us putting animals in a 2-acre paddock? The concept is don't bear off all your land. Bring them in and find an area that's not going to blow, you know, that's really rocky or something like that. Yeah. And try and leave the landscape. So when we look at our systems moving forward, it's trying to balance the two. We're not losing production. You know, we've got all our sheep. Our sheep become so productive, we can feed them for 12 months now and still make money. So I look at a balance. I don't think if you want to environmentally impact huge tracts of this country, it's got to be profitable. Yeah. And you've got to tie that with environmental, you know, regeneration as well. Yeah. I don't think the two, if you're not making money, nothing's going to change. You know, you look at who owns Australia, they're super funds. You know, there's a lot of high net worth individuals. You know, to get this environmental message across, and I think that's what Holbrook Landcare has done a really good job trying to tie production and regenerative into one. Yeah. And it's a tough gig.
Yeah, no, of course it is.
But I think busting the myths open is one of my key things, and that confined feeding is my absolute passion.
But I think most people have this vision when you say confined feeding of this hysteria that they see on What the Health or Game Changers or all these propaganda documentaries that come out, and that's not what you're talking about. And so paint the picture, Tom. Can I tell you,
it's really interesting. I really love the animal emotion research. And do you know what it comes down to? It's a bit like people. Most animals would actually rather be in a feedlot, you know, in a confined area because they've got food, they've got water, providing they're not cold, they're not wet, they're not in, you know, they're actually really happy. Yeah. But from a genetic standpoint, some animals enjoy it more than others. No different to people. You know, you got mates who always in their hiking gear, climbing around mountains. Yep. You know, the other ones are probably in a pub in Wallara. You know, that's the mix, you know, and animals are the same. They're different. So we've got to evolve sheep for systems. And we always say that. We've got a production system. We've got to evolve sheep to be able to handle that system. And you know, there's our sheep. I can guarantee when they're in that confined area, which they are, most of them all are in there at the moment being fed silage.
What's a confined area though? Like, is it a closed shed with no sunlight?
No. We're talking just small paddocks.
Small paddocks. So they're still getting out vitamin D.
They're still walking. They're still in the sun.
But that's the thing, Tom. I think people like hearing confined areas, they're going to these fucking massive sheds that are full of chickens that are dying and they're fat and they're fed so fast and they're poor little legs and ligaments and things don't grow to support them. And that's what the average punter, particularly us city idiots, envisage. There's, you know, there's beautiful Biggest Little Farm documentaries and that's one way to do it. And the other is these big industrialized feedlots. And there's such a big spectrum in between. And I think getting more people to not only hear but actually come out and see how these animals are treated and how healthy it is for them, how healthy it is for you and your family and the community, and how important that is for society, because God only knows we don't need more, even doctors, lawyers, marketing people, and we do need to be more balanced and holistic in our approach to this.
Well, I think you've got to be able to farm. I always say to our staff, we're going to be able to farm like everything's on YouTube. If there's a practice that you feel a bit queasy doing in front of a camera to put on YouTube, question why you do it. Yeah. If there's a paddock that you think is blowing or, you got to be able to put it up.
I love that.
And, every time, you see something on the Farm Ock Challenge, everything's got to go on YouTube. And that's, you got to be transparent. Yeah. We're quite proud of our confinement paddocks. They're small paddocks, but these sheep have got shade. We clean the water every day.
Yeah.
So my kids have just had a 6-week break. They clean the troughs every day. And I always say, and if they can't, I bring a cup.
Yeah.
If they can't drink it, don't expect the sheep to. That's it's amazing. Awesome, I love, pen 42. All of a sudden I look at them, might be a bit green still. And I ask the kids, I say, I'm getting the cup. They go, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude. Even good quality silage, you almost want to be able to eat it yourself.
That's powerful.
So that's the realities. And I think we've got to get that balance between production and also environment. And it's a really complex beast.
It is a complex beast.
But I think we are making headway.
Yeah.
I came home and got hit with the 06 drought, got hit very hard. Bought my first farm, sitting there, and it actually scarred me, I think, mentally. But it actually, the thing I love about this drought, we're in such a better place. We get our systems better. Our sheep are so much more adaptable to variable climates now.
Yeah.
And, it is such a better way to be, and you sort of feel better as a business and as a person knowing, what, we can do this. And that's I suppose it's very satisfying.
Yeah. How do you think, and it's in a similar vein to what we're talking about right now, we've had a bunch of the plant-based, so Impossible, Beyond, we've spoken to them all, and I think they're very well-intentioned people, and you look at places like GFI, which is that Good Food Institute that seems to be the driving force behind a lot of these movements. But when we start to talk to them and dig below the surface around, tell us more why this is so good for the environment. Like, tell us how all of this crop, and most of it's soy, like let's take Impossible, it's all a soy-based product. How is the intensive farming of massive, massive amounts of land to grow soy that you then take to massive, big industrialized facilities all over the United States, and you fill it with another 21 ingredients and you put it together into this plant-based alternative, this plant-based meat alternative, and then you ship that all over the country and all over the world. How do you actually tell me that that's good for the environment, the animals, and the animals being all the insects that you spoke about before, birds, rats, mice, all those kinds of things, and ultimately humans, and they're never, ever able to answer it? And I'm just curious, when people talk to you about what you do and start bringing up it's cruel, it's bad for the environment, how do you approach it?
Well, I suppose the first thing, and, we're getting better at understanding what we're producing in terms of output and input of methane. So,
but it's not just methane, Tom. Like, that's just one part of the problem.
But I think the big thing is this monoculture farming.
Massive.
And I definitely think there's going to have to be a component of it. But when you look at it in America, there's whole states that are just down to corn and soy and whatnot. I just think it's clever marketing, and I think there'll definitely be a portion of the market go that way, but it actually doesn't worry me that much.
Doesn't worry us that much either.
And I don't know if I'm being complacent, but I think it's just it's a bit like playing football. We're worrying about our own game. Let's not worry about what plant-based alternatives are doing. Let's just get our own house in order. And that's always been my attitude. Let's sure we've got nothing to hide. Make sure, we're moving forward. in all, the triple bottom line: financial, environmental, animal welfare, social, and not worry about it. I honestly don't think, with a big, there'll be a section of the population that takes off. I think it'll sort of fit within that flexitarian meal agenda, one a week.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to worry us. We look at the other end of the scale where we look at Asia, all of a sudden, every time someone hits $35,000 per capita income, their meat consumption goes up.
Yeah.
So for every person who might say, you know what, I'm going to go and have an Impossible Burger, we've got someone else who's probably sick of eating rice 3 times a day that all of a sudden pipes up and go, you know what, I want a good steak.
Yeah.
So from a global macro point of view, I'm actually not worried.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden governments intervene and start really changing the game, that worries me. But in terms of the average Joe, hardworking Aussie, do I think they're going to ditch meat for a plant-based alternative? I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
But they do want to see, environmentally balanced outcomes and animal welfare.
Yeah. And
we've got to keep lifting that game.
Yeah.
The sad thing is, the press are always going to find the 1%, and that's live exports is a classic.
What's your view on that?
My view is live exports is not a bad thing. And I'll qualify that. We live export sheep. We actually live export them in Qantas planes in crates in air conditioning.
Do you do it because that's what the end buyer requires?
No, so we send breeding material.
Okay.
We do a bit of that. So we just sent some to Qatar. We've sent to New Zealand, So all thing, and I suppose certain areas, certain times of year, so Middle East in that June, July period should be banned.
Because of the heat?
Because all of a sudden the heat and humidity, there's just no room for error. I think the question is you got to ask this live export, if Australia pulls out of a market, who goes in? And all of a sudden we look at, say, the countries like Oman in Africa who have got no code of conduct, who jam sheep 3 times as thick.
Yeah.
So live export's going to happen whether Australia likes it or not.
Yeah.
So we're the only country that's actually overseas in Indonesia and all these markets educating the locals on animal welfare.
Got it.
So you've got to look at that impact. So I'm quite comfortable about live exports. I see kids a lot more uncomfortable in economy going to London than I do sheep on boats.
Good analogy.
And it's amazing how many people will judge you who are in the racehorse industry.
Yeah.
Or who fly with kids in economy, jammed in this little. So, it is, there's definitely a component of live export that's got to be sharpened up.
Yeah.
And that's Middle East during those hot months. The press paying people for footage is a really dangerous game to play.
Yeah.
When you've got lowly paid Middle Eastern workers, and all of a sudden Animals Australia dangle money on them in front of a footage, I think that's a really dangerous thing to happen.
Is that where those ag-gag laws in the US came from, that they were not trying to hide from anything but protect someone cherry-picking a certain situation and it affecting an entire industry?
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of those laws, but I just know you see some of that stuff. It's got to be like everything. It's got to be continuous improvement. There's a lot of people in Indonesia who rely on Australian beef, as a source. So if they don't get it from us, they're going to get it from somewhere else.
Yep.
Yes, there was no doubt that they were slaughtering animals in a way they shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But it's just getting tighter controls, making sure if cattle or sheep go to these markets, they're slaughtered humanely in line with what happens in Australia.
Yeah.
And I think by us being there, we changed the culture as well. All of a sudden, if Australia was in Indonesia and Middle East, those cultures won't change. So live export, as I said, we have exported sheep before, but no different to what you'd put your kids into London.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I think that should be banned? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Do I think we've got to really look and say where the issue is coming from and tighten that up?
It's interesting on the flip side of the whole vegan plant-based is this carnivore movement that seems to, and I think both of them have their weaknesses. obvious weaknesses that they're just too binary and they're too extreme and they're very us against them. But there seems to be a lot of very educated, powerful people that are adopting the carnivore movement. Like Dr. Sean Baker and I saw in January Joe Rogan did the whole carnivore challenge and had incredible results. And it's interesting to see when you pit. Let's talk about a carnivore because I think most of us are just omnivores, but a carnivore against a pure vegan and look at the results of the health outcomes for humans. That they can talk as much as they want about meat causing cancer because, again, we know the research is flawed. But if you look at the ostensible results of a carnivore versus a vegan, I know which approach. If I was forced to take one of them, which I would do from a purely selfish human health perspective. And I think that's one of the things that's going to very quickly flick the movement on its head, that we'll have this generation of people that fundamentally don't have the knowledge to be optimally healthy eating just plants.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I just think it's not going to go away, but I don't think the dial on Middle Australia and the world's going to change significantly. We've just, but coming back to, we've got to get on that front foot. I watched Game Changers the other day, and I think they picked about 2 or 3 athletes that seemed to go all right, but they missed that probably other million that. Yeah,
well, listen to the Chris Kresser debunking on the Joe Rogan show. It's very good, and then they do another one with James, whatever his name is, from the Game Changers, where it becomes very combative. That he then debunks the debunking, but I think as long as you keep going to pure science and the people that aren't conflicted, that it was just another piece of well-intentioned but propaganda at that, and that if people are using that as and I've got friends that I almost want to disown because I said, if that's the basis of your decision making, you're clearly an idiot. That it's just so shallow and so binary and cherry picked in what it presents, that I just don't understand how educated, intelligent human beings are risking their health and believing they're doing the right thing to the planet based on a 90-minute documentary that's been funded by people with very conflicted
but interests. So much of that information, it doesn't matter if it's Australian politics or veganism, small bits of information are running this world at the moment.
True.
And that's where the environmental, we've got some serious issues as a country. You look at our political system, you look what's just happened over January.
Does it worry you, like climate-wise and political influence on, does it really worry you as a farmer?
The political component?
Yeah.
My biggest gripe with Australia at the moment is the way we treat our politicians. We just bag them.
Bag them and then sack them.
Yeah, and I look at it, it does my head in. And I look at, say, ScoMo going on holidays. I thought the way we treated that was a disgrace. He's got a young family.
Yeah.
The fires have been going for a month or 2 months, and full well he knew that they're going to go for a few more months. You look at the way we just attack our politicians, and these investigative journalism just spend the whole time trying to find mud. The issue we're not going to find good people. There's no way. Would you go into politics?
No chance.
And that's where you go, well, if we don't change all these environmental stuff, unless we get the right people leading us, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
So, and that's where, if I look at the core root of the issue, it's actually getting the right leaders. And I think we're doing a really good job of making sure the good ones don't apply.
Yeah.
So
who was the last really great leader do you reckon we had?
Well, the biggest issue, being a farmer, often Nat's a Liberal supporter, but the problem is we seem to kill anyone that's in the middle. Turnbull, I reckon, while he didn't articulate that well, I thought his core beliefs were good.
Yeah.
With climate change, gay marriage, you name it, it was great.
Yeah, well, he was just a very smart guy.
And I love politicians that come off the street, who've got a bit of life experience.
Yeah.
And Turnbull's one of them. I actually reckon, I look at that Angus Taylor. He's a smart bloke. He's there for the right reasons, and we just go after these people. I actually looked at the farm, the Grassgate. You would have heard about that? I looked at that farm. the paddock they were talking about was this little rocky paddock that we actually couldn't put sheep in. We looked at it, because there was so many thistles, and weeds, you couldn't actually put sheep in there. And you look at, say, the impact of that has, and I've got this dude I went to school with at Peter Van Alselen, and you look at them just go after these politicians.
Yeah.
And their job is just to go after them, and it just does my head in. It really does.
Yeah.
Because if you do get good people, they go, bugger this. I can just go and get a salary for NAV for $500,000 and not have to worry. So all of these core issues to do environmental, we've got to get the right people. And so as a farmer, that's the thing that worries me.
Yeah.
You look at some of these really good people, and I had to talk to that David Littleproud. He's a new agricultural minister. He's in a Queensland election. Ask him how often he sees his kids. I know growing up when Dad was in politics, we used to see him an hour or two a week.
Yeah.
So you got these people who are doing it for the right reasons.
Sacrificing everything.
Scamo, how often did he see his kids?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we want to bag the hell out of them and wonder why we haven't got good politicians. So all these issues have got to start with the average punter.
Yeah.
Just back off. Be constructive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my core view, because so many of these big picture issues, and we have got some big issues, as a country. You look at coal. Coal contributes a hell of a lot to our economy.
Yeah.
So does natural gas. So it's easy for us to say, let's get rid of it. But I can tell you now.
We still want our lights on at night, want to drive our cars.
But also we want schools and hospitals.
Yeah.
So they're really our decisions, and whilst everyone's harping up and down, I do think we need to change the dial. God, Australia's got some big decisions ahead of it, to do with, what creates money. And you look at those biggest export earners, take out coal, natural gas,
and iron ore,
beef.
Yeah. We're in all sorts. Yeah.
So as a farmer, it's probably that political thing that worries me the most.
Yeah.
And, Jacinda in New Zealand's done some good things.
Yeah.
But, she's upset a lot of farmers too.
What policies has she introduced that have upset the farmers?
Well, she had the billion tree policy.
Yeah.
And I don't know it in great detail, but I'm in farming groups with New Zealanders. When you create tax incentive for people to buy farms for trees, that's, it's a bit off. There's no doubt some of those New Zealand farmers need to pull their head in. Some of the dairy, the amount of nitrogen they were putting on pastures was creating water quality issues. There were some issues there. But I do firmly believe, we've got to do it with the carrot, not the stick. I like it. I mean, I think, she's an impressive person, but it's getting that balance. And that's everything we're talking about today is going to come down to leadership and getting good policy.
Yeah.
And it's bloody complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is consumers being willing to pay more for better quality food.
Yep.
Like for me, this is we can talk about government, we can talk about companies and corporations and farming practices till the cows come home, until that end consumer is prepared to pay more for a better quality product that is farmed the right way, then it won't matter what happens upstream.
And 100%. And that's, we unfortunately, with the way our retail industry works, we've been dominated by a few companies and the race to the bottoms happen.
Yep.
When a litre of milk was more expensive than a litre of water, we had some issues. So, and I think, unfortunately, people don't value food. And I've heard you talk about, food is the medicine, everything else.
Yeah.
People, they've got a disposable income. The less they can spend on food, the better. And that's
so perverse, Tom. Like it is, and anyone that hasn't had a parent that's died of a chronic disease needs to understand that, and maybe there's some genetics to that too, but predominantly it's about the things we do throughout our life.
Yep.
What we do put in our bodies and what we don't put in our bodies, how we move and how we don't move. Probably the four things that will determine the second half of your life.
Yep.
And so if you don't invest in them in the first half, and Kerry Packer was very famous for this saying, that you can't buy back your health once it's gone.
Yep.
And so if you look at your life as an entirety and take that view of like a true long-term view, that it is from the day you're born to the day you die, you're going to spend a certain amount of money.
Yep.
Without doubt, the cheapest way to do that is to spend a lot of money on food and look at it as medicine.
Yep. And I find I always love Professor David Hughes. You're probably Welsh dude.
Yeah.
You know, I love some of his theories. And one of the biggest issues we see, and we look at, you know, the lamb we produce, we're dealing with one consumer that has a different brain. And I love his analogy to health and eating. You know, we work in a credit debit society.
Yeah.
You know, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we try and accumulate credit points by eating healthy.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we eat, you know, lean meat and veggies and whatnot, accumulate the credit points and spend them on the weekend.
Yeah.
So it is really hard because some of those high, you know, greener brands, they're probably more during the week products. You know, on a Sunday, it's probably a Wagyu or a, you know, whatever else. The price point you need on some of those products to make it sustainable, you know, the average consumer after a bender on the weekend is probably trying to pull back. So it is a really complex from a consumer point of view on how we try and incorporate brands that have got green credentials.
Yeah.
And also, you know, getting paid for it. Because it is, you know, if all of a sudden you're losing production to get better environmental outcomes, there's got to be you've got to
payoff.
Get a payoff.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And that's hard. And I mean, you guys, you know, you've got some great brands. You know, are consumers willing to pay 40% more?
Yeah.
For those,
it's becoming increasingly hard to get them to pay more,
particularly with food service.
Yeah.
So,
which again, I don't blame them. I blame their consumer.
Yep.
Because they want a bargain. I go, the second they're prepared to pay more than the food service restaurants, pubs, etc., will pay more because they can afford to. Like they're the middlemen like us.
Yep.
It all has to be consumer driven, and it's this whole concept of, and I do hope technology gets us to this point really quickly where we can actually determine nutrients.
Yep.
That you're buying nutrients. You're not buying a steak for $45 a kilo. You're buying a certain amount of nutrients.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, that's look at some of the tomatoes, and we're very fortunate. A supplier of yours lives next door to us, Holbrook Paddock Eggs. I think they're supplier of Vicks. You know, you look at their eggs, you know, and there is a difference.
Yeah.
You know, you look at those really well-grown tomatoes who, you know, there is a difference. And I think from a meat point of view, it's really getting that point of difference. And that's often hard because sometimes an animal in the beef industry, which has got better green credentials, doesn't taste as good as an animal who doesn't have the green credentials.
Yeah,
that might have been on feed for 300, 400 days. So it is getting that balance. And I look at it, when we breed our sheep, we breed for two markets. We breed cheaper, leaner, during the week type lambs.
Yeah.
And then obviously some of our high-end, high marbled stuff is more weekend, small portion size. And it's,
Have you done any testing on the nutrient density between those two products?
No, we haven't.
It'll be fascinating, I reckon.
It would be.
To see.
Yep.
You know, that 200 grams of the richer stuff and how much of the other. And if you extrapolated that on an actual nutrient basis, they're probably very, very similar.
So that's a challenge. And the meat industry's got to really, you know, and I think where we'll see it is where big brands become, you know, the carbon neutral. And I think that's the only way is get our current big brands to try and become greener, who have got the street cred, so, and we've seen that in a lot of, you know, all of a sudden, you know, whilst we don't like, you know, the retail dominance, you know, sow-free, cage-free stalls for pigs and free-range chickens, I think it's when we get, you know, big brands that put environmental and welfare behind it that we'll see the dial change.
When you say big brands, the producers or the retailers?
The retailers.
Yeah.
And, I say that both, you know, and I think that's what we need to do is have, you know, and you're seeing some of these brands with the carbon neutral debate just buying offsets, you know, and that's become a bit of a new thing. But, you know, that's not really, to me.
That's bullshit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a long journey, but it's just, you know, in every what we do, it's just basically getting what we want to be able to do is get the accountancy right.
Yeah.
So we can tell people what carbon's in our soil.
Yeah.
You know, how does that vary? And
I love that.
We're not in a position, I think, you know, is VIX in 10 years' time, every bit of beef they've got has, you know, metrics of environmental, you know, information on it.
It'd be amazing. But I think the one thing that people need to start understanding is that we've got in the Western world this ridiculous dichotomy of 70 to 80% of the population are overweight and obese, and 70 to 80% of the population are malnourished in some shape or form, and that therefore we're fundamentally doing something wrong. So the solution to both is to eat less calorie-dense, nutrient-poor foods and replace it with smaller amounts of nutrient-dense and calorie-low foods.
And there's two parts of that, you know, and I always – socioeconomics drives people's attitude to food. You know, and if you're in the Sahara Desert, do you care if, you know, what you have is carbon neutral? Yeah. You just want 3 meals a day.
Got it.
And I love that Springbok captain, you know, when he won the World Cup, they asked the question, you know, did you dream of, you know, winning the World Cup? He said, I just dreamed of getting him 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, so I think we can sit here talking about all these things, but at the end of the day, there's a hell of a lot of people in poverty. You know, yes, industrial farming is bad, but it is feeding a lot of people. So we've probably got to take a step back and go, how can we change that? How can we feed those people in better systems? And I hate people, you know, I got up, spoke at my son's classroom the other day and everyone was, you know, basically saying, you know, everything needs to go organic. These kids were, you know, supercharging ideas and you know, I had a rough figure in my head. I think it was half, you know, 50% of world's food production would halve if everyone became organic. Yeah. So the first thing I said, stand up that half the class.
Yeah, you're gone.
You're gone.
Yeah.
You know, and they were shocked. I said, so the answer is how do we produce enough food to feed the whole class, but do it in an environmental, and it comes back to it's a hard gig.
It's a hard gig.
So, you know, I'm a bit, you know, every time we get a bit excited about it, industrial, and don't get me wrong, the dial's got to change on some of the animal welfare practices. We've got to be mindful that, you know, not everyone, you know, in the world lives in the eastern suburbs.
Thank God.
Yeah. So, and that's hard. It's a complex debate.
It is a complex debate. On that, mate, I think we should go and have a steak and a cold beer.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on, Tom.
Thanks, Shory.